his main thing was is that no matter how you slice it, at the end of the day, he was saying kind of what Betsy is that women usually are the people who have the most need of a gun for self-defense, because no matter how strong they are, they still can't necessarily be strong than a decently strong man, and sometimes guns are their only recourse to self-defense, and that's an extremely valid reason for someone to have a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what lets you live alone in a very remote location.
Exactly.
The closest help is probably 15, 20 minutes away as far as police help goes. If I was to call the sheriff or somebody was wanting to kick in my door, my only defense in this country is a firearm. That's the only thing that allows me freedom of movement. That's the only thing that protects me from assault. That is, I have nowhere near the strength of a man who might want to kick in my front door or crimes like that. I agree with you that firearms won't do anything to help us keep our rights. Our rights are already flying out the window, and like the prior caller said, no one notices. No one's commenting on it. Those are gone. I'm not going to be able to protect myself from my government with firearm. I can, however, protect myself from a criminal.
Exactly.
Someone who wants to take my freedom, take my life, whatever that is. That, to me, is the primary reason that we need firearms in this country. We cannot have a policeman on every corner.
So
we don't want a policeman on every corner.
So do you
even if you did, it wouldn't stop, people coming into. There's most of the rapes, a large majority of the rapes, that happen, don't happen on the street corner necessarily. They happen in people's homes. They happen during home invasions, or they happen during parties. They happen, in the backs of clubs and things like this. You can't have policemen there all the time. And, police and laws are for the pursuing of criminals who have already committed the crime.
Correct.
But once a woman's been raped, she's already been raped, and the damage has been done. And I would say that a great deal of damage. And from a woman's perspective, I would think, not being a woman, I can't say, maybe Betsy can say, that rape is a very strong violation.
Absolutely.
It's a very strong violation, and it's one of those ones that's tolerated a little too much in our society. I think the statistic that I heard once is that a woman is raped like every 3 minutes. I mean, it's an insulting level of rape in America.
It's horrific.
It's horrific.
And we're expected to, for some reason, accept that, and more often than not, it's actually flipped on the victim. What did you do to get raped?
Often.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's you were wearing high heels, suddenly
you were in the wrong place at the wrong. What were you doing there alone is the one that you hear all the time, like a woman is supposed to go everywhere escorted by a man. I am Mr. Kimber.
Yeah, that's pure psychopathic. That's pure psychopathic thinking, and
it's infected even
blame the victim.
It's blaming the victim, and that's what you see with a psychopathic, polarized society. I would even say, for a certain sense, that it's actually what you see in a kind of the mean-spirited authoritarian aspect. The violations are your fault,
Exactly.
because you were doing, because a lot of the times what people do is it gets presented that the women who get raped are usually, they're independent, you see, and that sort of violates the status quo of these authoritarian things.
Of the patriarchal
A woman
society.
shouldn't be outside of it. She should be barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen, cooking dinner, and if she's out, doing business and gets raped, then, well, she got what she deserved type of thing. And it's mean-spirited in
It's not
society
just mean-spirited,
today.
it's psychopathic.
And it's also a crime against poverty. I mean, most of the people who are victims of these crimes are poor or marginal or lower middle class, whereas everyone who's trying to promote gun control has bodyguards. And have you noticed that? Every single person who wants to take, in the U.S. government, who wants to take your guns away, who wants to pass laws that say average citizens cannot have guns, they have bodyguards. They have the wealth to protect themselves with paid security people with guns, and then they want to take that same right away from you.
It's bullshit.
So
it's total bullshit.
Let me just ask you, Betsy, what's your opinion on, in your section of U.S. society, do you feel kind of secure or insecure when you're going about your daily business?
I'm very secure. I have a Kimber 45. I'm completely secure. I go where I want, when I want, whatever time I want.
So you don't feel threatened, generally speaking?
Not at all. I live completely without the fear that a lot of women have because they're not trained or prepared to protect themselves.
So you would put that down just to the owner, having a gun, being an owner of a gun? You put
Absolutely. I mean, there are places that I simply could not go. I would not feel as comfortable living here. I would be in constant fear without a method of protecting myself. And that's the other thing, too, is that it's not just that you're going to protect yourself, but the weapon itself prevents the crime without it ever being drawn. Predators look for easy prey. They can look at a woman who is fearful and see her and go after her, whereas they see a woman like me walking down the street, I look them in the eye, they know I'm armed. And it never goes beyond that point because they go pick easier prey.
They have proved this in psychological studies where they have taken sexual predators, rapists, and things like that. They have shown them videos of women walking down halls, and they have been able to pick out the weakest kind of member, the members who have been sexually assaulted before and therefore would be primed for another sexual assault.
Or the ones that just feel insecure.
Or the ones that feel insecure.
Well, I remember the study. They were able to pick out the more insecure one just by the way she walked.
Exactly.
And it was a tiny little thing, just a little
sloop
or a little shrug on the shoulder or something.
Yeah.
You can also tell if a person is carrying a firearm by the way they walk. I mean, police do this as well. A lot of trained police officers can stand on a city street and look and tell who is walking and carrying a weapon and who isn't.
Absolutely.
So, Betsy, do you see it as any kind of an indictment on American society in general that you need to carry a gun to feel secure?
That's humanity. I mean, we've always had predators, we've always had psychopaths, and we always will. Do we have more now? I think we have more in government, but I don't think there's any possible way to eliminate. Women have been, being raped since a man first picked up a club and started walking upright. I don't see that we're any different now in that respect than, say, the Old West or even prior to that. In Roman times, women who carried daggers, in certain cultures before guns were invented, they made it against the law for people to carry swords. In Europe and places like that, again, they're creating victims. Anytime someone is deprived of the most popular weapon of the time, then that creates a victim, a potential victim.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been true. And in my article, I quoted some legislation from way back in Queen Elizabeth I time.
1566, yeah.
1566. And I had heard of some legislation from, like, Greek times. I just didn't have time to go through because I like to check as much as possible the sources, and I didn't have time to for the article. But, I mean, I know that there are extant texts talking about the limiting of armaments, even back to the Greek city-states time and stuff. It's the long history of weapon legislation, which, as Betsy was saying, it creates victims, and it creates an insecure society. And the problem is that you have a lot of people arguing from a lot of different angles. You have part of the gun lobby is arguing irrationally for we need to defeat the government or protect ourselves from the government. Now that's true. It's true. The problem is it's impractical. You just can't do it anymore.
Well, can I insert something in there? I agree with you if it was the population trying to rise up against the government. The whole concept of the populace having what they erroneously call assault weapons, semi-automatics and high-capacity magazines and whatnot, would be if a portion of our military woke up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
At that point, having an armed populace to support that portion of our military who realize, our Constitution has been completely subverted. It is time to just, lock up all these psychopaths and start over with fresh elections. Then, yes, having an armed populace would be very, very useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it would take generals who have access to major troops that would finally say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. But then, yes, as a supportive of that, again, we're back to, how the original Revolutionary War happened. It was a very small military and supported by a very large armed populace.
Yeah, it was. And, I mean, the American Revolution, happened at a time where it was very possible to do those things and to win. In that sense, it's not quite the same because it's one thing to rebel against your foreign masters that have to cross an ocean and have it's very costly for them to occupy you, and it's a different situation if you try to rebel against a government that is established within you without, as she was saying, the support of a conscientious military.
I think you're cutting. You're not taking into account how huge this country is. I mean, what you're saying I would agree with in the cities, in the major cities, but if you're talking about these remote, it would be impossible for our government to stop a revolution that started nationwide. We simply don't have a large enough military.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking our country is as big as the UK. I mean, yes, they could be able to oppress and control. They could send the military in to control major city dwellers, but out in the country, no, I don't.
I agree with it if you look at it from that perspective, okay? But in a certain sense, there have been several researchers in recent times. General Frank Kitson from the UK, Major Trinquier from the French, that they talk about that exact problem. The fact is that countries are very large, and it's hard to go and get the guerrillas, right? And they talk about like even in Algeria, they found it very difficult to suppress guerrilla movements.
Well, look at Afghanistan.
Right. And in Afghanistan,
and the Russians in Afghanistan, and now us, the United States in Afghanistan. They're all guerrillas.
So you have to see the strategy that they came up with, and which Trinquier talks about, Kitson talks about, is that actually what they don't do is they don't go after the guerrillas. They said it's a waste of time to do it. The country's so big they can hide. They know the area.
Yeah.
What they actually do, and they talk about it, and they admit it. First of all, they dress up like the people, the guerrillas, and go around and commit crimes in their name. And they launch a massive propaganda campaign against their own peaceful population to make it so that they have no ground to go to. It's a Sunzu strategy. If they go to ground, have no ground to go, that type of thing. So what they do is they don't go after you in the jungles. They leave you, and you can hit your little things here and hit your little things there. And they go after their own population with a strong propaganda campaign and false flag operations to get them to hate you, so that whenever you go from town to town, you're rejected, you're reported, and there's no safety for you. So that has been the developed recent strategy since from like the 1980s, 1950s, and 60s on, from their experiences in Kenya and Malaysia, Algeria, Indochina. Right? Because what you're saying, Betsy, is completely correct. That was the problems that they found with the Russians in Afghanistan, and even what they're finding now. Going into a foreign country and suppressing rebels is very difficult because they know the lay of the land, they know where to go, and they're supported by the population. So what they're trying to do in America, and I think it was Genevieve who was pointing this out, the separation of people. They're testing different types of polarization. One of those issues is smoking. Another one of those issues is gun control.
Yeah.
They're trying to polarize the population.
And abortion, and a dozen different other issues.
Yeah.
Homosexuality, alternative religions. They want to polarize people against each other so that they can't have any kind of effective...
divide the population.
And it's very successful. Unless a portion of our military actually broke off, and started a cleansing of Washington, D.C., let's say. I mean, I realize I'm creating a total figment of imagination here because they're very well-programmed little soldiers. I don't think this would ever happen.